feel the way your pieces kind of tell you that you're constantly thinking about what the next creation might be, or do you walk away and put everything to rest, or are you always giving birth to something else?
I'm always giving birth to something else, and something else meaning, okay, when I go to sleep at night, I think about art. When I wake up in the morning, I think about art. I think about certain things. I mean, it may be a particular issue that I'm having trouble with, okay, and trying to find, because as an artist, I'm always trying to find the language, that particular vocabulary that I need to use to communicate, and sometimes I'm off. Another tool that I have is visualization. When I conceive a particular piece, I sort of see it done already, but I don't know how it's going to look when it's done, but it's done. Okay? So I have a path. If I lose that visualization, something's wrong. So I need to find that particular thing as to what's going on with my communication, with my expression. So yes, there's a constant turmoil. I'm not a calm man.
Especially in the kitchen.
Especially in the kitchen, yes. So this was the last piece that you saw on the slides. This is called Never at Rest. And this is a piece, okay, that can go into a number of different positions. It exists on 3 points. It has all the dimensions in terms of the internal, external activity, as well as the landscaping that really goes in and throughout the entire piece. I mean, many of these pieces all kind of worked with that idea, but they sort of touched on certain points. They never really sort of reached to that particular point of where what I'm sort of expressing in these particular pieces now is that where we have the figure here, okay? I can lay it this way. It's not laying or fallen down. It has a new position, a new dimension to what's going on. I can put it, where is it? Like that. Again, it's a new dimension. Yeah. It's changed now. The whole concept, the whole dynamics between the figures have changed in the relationship to each other.
It's always in motion.
Always in motion, exactly. So notice what I'm doing is I'm taking the whole idea of singularity, which many sculptors work with, okay? Where yes, you have the sculpture here, you have a sort of three-dimensionality that you're working around with, and you're seeing everything else, but that's the way you see it. My feeling is that, okay, I should be able to go up there and push it over, and then as it rolls and stops, there's a new activity that occurs at that point. That's why I'm working with these now. And that's what I'm actually have given the opportunity for everybody here to also experience, is to work, is to pick up some of these pieces and begin to experience some of the activity that goes within these perpetual motion figures. These,
Don't drop it.
what's that?
Don't drop it though.
Yeah, well, make sure it's not on your toes. Yes?
You mentioned earlier that you search for language.
Yes.
And is it because you need the language for the creation, or is it part of it, or how do you use the language? Can you explain that a little bit more to me?
It's actually both, in terms of is that, yes, I need the language to create to myself because I need to know as to, well, how am I communicating with that particular piece.
So if you can't find the language, are you stuck?
Yes.
Or are you searching?
I'm stuck and I'm searching
You are.
to find that particular dimension. Many of the pieces that I have sort of shown in terms of the evolution of things, I was sort of tapping on things and sort of expressing certain viewpoints. So now I think I like this, and I like that what I had said, and I like that what I said. Now I'm trying to bring that all together and sort of make it even more so, because this will then allow me to expand my language to something else which I have no idea where it's going at that point. But I'm giving it the opportunity to go out there. Okay? Does that help?
That's another reason why you're doing a lot of
Mhm.
reading.
Yes, reading and well, in terms of, just sort of feeling, observing things. Somebody had asked me once, he said, well, do you have models? I said, well, I used to. Much of it is my head. But in actuality, you are all my models, okay? The way he holds his head and he's smiling at me, the way she is, with her arms crossed, everybody is a model that I'm seeing, and I'm picking up a little thing here and there and absorbing it into my mind, and then that becomes part of my information to continue with some of these particular ideas that I see.
How
Yes.
do you put these together? Do you come up with the pieces, the individual pieces separately or as part of the whole?
In these particular cases, they come separately, and I put each of the figures individually apart. Okay? Then I began to work the two of them together, and I find that particular dynamics where the figures then begin to express the motion of what's going on.
But I mean particularly, let's say this piece of leg.
Mhm.
You come up with the individual parts, or do you start from the whole and kind of slice it up?
No, I come up with the individual parts, and then I begin to put them together, and then work it that way. Now, can anybody tell me as to what's going on with this particular piece here?
Wrestling, no?
Hmm?
Wrestling?
Well, it's sort of a wrestling, yes, but what is unusual about this piece? It's actually leading me into a series of works.
Hint, the title is Similarity.
Is it the same
Figures
figure?
are identical, I guess.
Is it,
Oh.
is it basically the same figure?
It's basically the same figure, but in its combination, okay, it changes.
So it's like that scroll you showed with the two, the use of reflection, two figures that
Yes.
were seen from different angles in the same piece.
Same piece, yes. So very, very similar to that, And in terms of is that how, in its connection together, even though they're almost like twins in a sense, they have different personalities in its motion, in its activity. How one, is sort of coming up, because that one is more on top of the other, and therefore you see it differently. And you would never think of it in terms of is that, well, this is, the same figure.
You do see a lot more as you change the way it rests. You see a lot of different things.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Just one comment about this layering technique, that to me, my first impression was that it's kind of like the mortality of the figure.
Mhm.
It's kind of falling apart. I don't know if it's, looking at some of those pieces over there, it kind of reminds me of like the old Greek
Mm-hmm.
sculptures that, that the whole piece is left over, but you already have something that is incomplete. So is there something that you wanted to express, that these pieces are fragile, and there's something about the mortality of the people that are presented here?
Well, the fragileness, or in terms of the fragmentation, yes, that represents a bit of mortality
Mhm.
within that concept. And it's basically is that, some of these particular things, especially like, for instance, that figure there, if I were to do a drawing, if I had one of my figurative drawings in there, you would see there were certain things were sort of drawn out, and then some things were just sort of left to float into the white parts of the page. So that's kind of, in a sense, is that I allow you to fill in the rest at that point. I give you enough information, and then you take it from there. Yeah. So that's part of the fragmentation. In this particular case, I didn't want to fragmentize as much. I wanted to give you the entire figure because there was another purpose that I needed to have you experience, is the vastness of this motion that begins to occur. If I try to do it on that, even in here we have, on the aberrance here, we have the two figures coming together, but it doesn't have that kind of same gestural activity as what occurs within perpetual motion pieces. Yes?
I have a couple of questions. The figures, the models that you have inside for the Dalai Lama
Mhm.
and also for Vincenti,
Yes.
it seems as though, I don't know if that's what you were trying to convey, but it seems like the Dalai Lama, you know, is trying to, it's about the nature of Earth, you know, that
Mhm.
he's very sad about it. And Vincenti also that, you know, he just, it almost is like it's hurting his heart, you know, with things that happened in Hungary. Was that what you were trying to convey, or?
The Dalai Lama, in terms of that sort of I used the mantra concept and working and then sort of the spiritualization of where his entity, you know, goes beyond the world, and sort of the whole vision and that particular state of existence, you know, at that point. In terms of Vincenti, I gave him, I mean, you know, those are good feelings that you had expressed. But one of the things that I had observed when I had seen him was he played with his cross a lot. He had it here, and he was always, you know, he was like, you know, tweaking it in some way or form, you know. And the other hand, you know, would do various things, but his right hand was always at the cross. And it was like, wow, you know, that is, you don't see it so much in photographs. I mean, if you look at all the photographs of the Cardinal, but when you see him in person, you know, he can be talking to you, and you know, he's fiddling with the cross, you know, at that point. So I felt like that was a piece that I needed to kind of put in there, because that was very much him at that point. What was he thinking at that point? Maybe, you know, he was thinking in those terms of what you were expressing at that.
Well, I just find that a lot when I came in here to
Mhm.
look at the different statues, personality of the person through it
Right.
by looking at them.
And that's what I was sort of, you know, reaching for.
And
At
that's
that
what I was
point,
looking at these, you know, how did that come about? What period of your life?
The
Or
paintings?
am I jumping ahead too far?
The paintings?
Yeah.
Paintings are actually relatively recent.
So,
And that was in terms of where was I going with it. What you see over there were my earlier paintings, that, and then the two portraits. One of my first wife, Phoebe, and then my self-portrait. I mean, those were kind of where I was in my traditional things. And of course, there's much more expressive, the creative piece that of the Soviet bloc, the captivity. I was involved with that. When I started to progress in these particular areas in sculpture, I left painting behind. And I sort of just kept moving with the sculpture, kept moving with it. The drawings came in, drawings I've always done, they're always sort of part of me in some way or form. But the painting sort of like, you know, ended up on the back burner. I mean, really on the back burner. You know, and it wasn't until about 3 years ago, friends of ours that were looking for some sunflower paintings down in New Hope and Lambertville, and you know, and they came into the house and they saw a painting that I did for my wife, you know, just as a birthday present, and said, "Can you paint us a painting?" And I'm going, "Yeah, I could. Yeah, sure." So it was like one of those things, and so I started to paint, but then I realized that I'm not painting, I'm just sort of gesturing with all these oils. So again, I did research. The masters that I had in painting when I had left my time period of those pieces were Monet, Cézanne, okay? Those were the ones that I sort of really got into. I mean, I also liked Van Gogh a lot. When I tried to research again these particular artists, it was like, yeah, guys, you know, you're nice, but you're not doing anything for me anymore. And I proceeded to go all the way back into the Flemish paintings and hook up with Van Eyck. And began to realize that Van Eyck was really the first modernist in developing paint and working with the ideas and going away from the fresco painters and everything that has occurred at that particular point in time. I mean, his whole concept of a visual esthetician, again, pushed it a little bit further. But I liked Van Eyck. So I began to study the processes, the techniques, the things that they were doing back in that point in time, which then allowed me to go ahead and create these two paintings. My friends only wanted one, but I gave them two, so they'd have a choice. And they liked both of them, so they bought both of them, which was like whip, whip. But it got me hooked up to where I was starting to say, all right, I need to do something else. And I began to work with paintings, like for instance, that particular piece over there. It's called September Picnic. And in dealing with the spaces of what's going on and around, and especially that little sort of fencing that had occurred, that's something that my wife had just built that summer. And I said, hey, you know, I like what's occurring and I like the dimension. I want to sort of bring that in. And I started to devise that particular piece. From there, then I went into things like this, which again, okay, I brought in the whole concept of what's behind the vase, what's around it. It's, you know, normally when you see a still life of flowers, you see them inside the room. Well, I put them on the outside, put them on the table out, you know. Italians always have flowers on their dinner tables outside, you know. So that's kind of how I sort of figured it, and that's why this is a setting for three. I started using the idea of food and concept and, you know, eating. That one is table for one, you know, yeah. You know, and sort of built, again, this sort of conversation of having with the flowers and what you're working with, and then of course the dynamics. And I was really pushing as much of the idea of rendering, of developing the form of the flowers at that point in time. When I reached a particular stage, and I think this is the last one here, is it to your liking, that I felt like, okay, I've expressed what I needed to push at that point. And though these are all very good paintings, there was sort of a certain unsatisfiedness that I was needed at that point. So I started to look for other things, and I started to devise different processes. I began to cut paintings apart, cut, you know, different things, put them together. It didn't work. That didn't work. Tape here, you know, kind of do things what I used to do with my drawings. That wasn't working, you know. And I just tinkered back and forth to all of a sudden I started to feel, all right, throw the brushes away, bring in the spatulas, bring as big a spatula as I can if it's possible, and just throw paint on, you know, and just begin to kind of load up the canvas. If you know, if it's too heavy, fine, no problem. You know, just don't give yourself any specific rules, because I was playing with some, you know, very technical rules up until this particular point. So I started to develop these, and in its process, I mean, using the spatula, coming across, laying the color down. I was wearing rubber gloves, so I could actually go in and I can use my fingers and push the paint and do various other things to it, and just open up the venue of what's happening with these particular paintings. And then I found an interesting part is that there's this layering that goes onto the surface, very much like my sculptures. There's an overlap layering that is developing. Now the paints are starting to, you know, begin to get in harmony with each other. At the same time, there's also a very kind of musical dynamics. I mean, we see Summer Gale over here that is quite, I mean, you see it, flowers and everything, but when you go up close, you see the action of the layers of paint that go on. You see the textural surfaces that are existent on that area. I mean, there's this activity, there's this motion that moves on. And I was sort of, you know, and music is also another thing that sort of plays a very strong part in what happens with these particular paintings, is that, you know, I mean, that particular piece over there, I sort of feel like I could if I had Dvorak's New World Symphony playing there, I could just enjoy the entire painting through the entire process. Yes?
Can you say a couple words about Apuka? Is that really your father?
That is my father, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Actually,
Mhm.
speaking of that Opuka, and then
Yes.
your name, GYURI, it kind of shows me that you have these, I don't know, these
Warm family
well,
relationship.
childlike expression, because obviously GYURI is a nickname. I would imagine everybody knows that, rather than George or
Oh,
George,
yeah.
which is a formal.
Right.
Why did you stay with GYURI?
It was simple. It was described me as, I mean, my first name is Erwin, which is also my father's. And then GYURI was the sort of like, which was my godfather's name as well. But whenever I was, somewhere, I was always sort of saw myself, because I had a heritage. As Erwin or Erwin, nobody really knew what my heritage was.
Mhm.
So GYURI sort of, like took that position where it wasn't too strange, but somebody could still like, you spell it with a GY? Oh, okay.
Distinctive artist.
Right,
Are
exactly.
you related to Shimon?
Yes.
What way?
Again, through my father, and Hollosy Shimon was my father's godfather. Yeah. And they lived in, my parents lived in the Marmaros, Petrova area, and Magbanya. And then they moved from there after the First World War coming out. But Shimon was there, and originally the family was known as Zongot. And when the name had to be changed, my grandfather took his mother's name, which was Hollosys, and that's how we became the Hollosy. Now, did I leave anything out here?
Well, maybe
What is the new direction?
The new direction is, who knows? Well, I mean, I have a new canvas that I'm working on, which is 4 foot by 7. That is a new direction. It is big, and it's somehow,
What is on it now? Empty?
it's empty now. But,
I do have one
It-
more
it-
question.
yes.
How did you feel with these colors? I mean, you've gone from this, which is very much this, for me,
Mm-hmm.
but the colors, I mean, that's a riot over there. I'm not talking about funny riot, but
Yeah.
to handle all of those colors.
Yes.
Must have been, you were in the flow.
I was in the flow, but again,
You
it's
were
like
in the flow.
it's like I love music,
Right.
and that had a lot to do with it. And many times late at night, when I'm working over there, and I'm
What
just
did you listen to?
different types of classical things, type of pieces, And so, whatever, I'm playing, okay, but I always had to have some sort of music that go on in my mind. And every once in a while, when I'm painting,
Right.
especially if I hear a particular piece or a dance, it's like, there's a certain activity, I was like, it's in there, somehow.
One more question.
Yes.
How much is your life fun, and how much does it really work? I mean, the rest of us. I always admire artists who do things that they enjoy doing, because often, as many of us are stuck with a job from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or longer hours, obviously.
Uh-huh.
So, what's the answer to that?
It's fun, okay, with naturally a certain amount of trials and tribulations that you're going through. But it's sort of like, you're kind of building your life. You're building constantly on yourself and what's going on. I mean, these big paintings were really influenced by these paintings here. And that's how I also see my life progressing, that as I'm progressing with these particular pieces, it is also developing my personal inner self, my awareness of things. I mean, there is some nirvana that I'm sort of seeking, okay? and it is through my work that I'm also seeking it at that point. Where and will I ever achieve it? I don't know, but I'm reaching for it, and I'm also going. And that's one of the things that in terms of is that when I do my work is that I'm always challenging myself, coming up with something, you know, that will give me something to think about, some kind of a direction. I never try to do constantly spinning. Is when I showed you in the slides, okay, I was doing these particular figures and I was sort of like going around in circles. Something was amiss. I needed to find a way off of this wheel.
New direction.
To a new direction, you know. And once I found that new direction, then I was beginning to progress into that area. Now, this part here, is that there?
That's right.
Magnified.
I may be alone in my ignorance, but could you give us some biographical background of information about yourself?
Biographical
I
background.
mean, your early years, where did you study, or how did you develop? How did you?
Mm-hmm. Well, my early years, like I said, you know, it started off when I was 12, seeing this monk that had, you know,
Where was that?
this one was up in outside of Buffalo, at the GYURI. And it was one of those things that when we came here, the monks were, and the priest simply said, let's take care of your children in the summertime. You guys try to acclimate yourself, meaning the parents, to the new life, the new country, and then we would be taken care of, which we did. And we had a lot of chores to do, and you know, and working and cleaning up, and we also had games, and we had nights out camping on Lake Erie and the whole thing. But in this one summer, they were building these chapels, and they had these pillars that were about the size of this block here. Huge ones, you know. It was like, and I was sitting in the back of the pew, and here's this monk priest. He had these coals, and he had these hot pokers, and he was heating them up, and the smoke was all over the place. And then he was taking them, and he was sort of burning the saints and etching them into the wood. And just seeing that, I was like, that's my inspiration. It just as simply is that this is what I want to do with my life. That's what I want. It wasn't an inspiration. This is what I want to do with my life. This is where I was like, okay, maybe burn saints, whatever. I don't know, but I had to be an artist. It was years later when my parents and my grandparents, we had family discussion together. You'd need to be an engineer, a lawyer, or a doctor. And they said, which one do you want to be? And I said, neither. I said, I want to be an artist, you know. And we had some scrambling scuffle until my mother stopped, and then brought out the fact that, look, we do have two painters in the family, one on each side. Do we deny him of this? Then my father took 4 days, which was the worst 4 days I've ever spent in my life, because he spoke very little to me at that point in time, because he had to make a decision as to what was going to come with my life. I mean, he would say hello, good night, you know, but he would never have conversations with me or joke with me, and he was a great jokester, you know, had a good sense of humor, but it was total silence. I mean, I was about ready to give it up. And I said, sure, I'll be a doctor. Just talk to me. And then he sat me down, and he simply said, look, it's a hard life to being an artist, and this is what you're thinking of doing. It's not going to be an easy track. He says, but the biggest thing that you have to do is you have to believe in yourself and what you're doing. You know, constantly believe in where you are going at this point. If you can do that, you can believe in yourself, I will be behind you and support you. I said, yes. And he had, right up to the end of his years, you know. I mean, even at one point, I was surprised that he was in a nursing home, and he was sort of in a kind of, not an Alzheimer's type thing, but every once in a while he would come out and he would say these little sentences, you know. And he came out this one time and he said, don't let anybody change your mind in what you want to do. And then he was gone. He just said that one sentence. It was like, whoa, yeah, where'd you come from? Yeah. But he had that moment of thought. So, that's that. Rest of it is educational, Cleveland Institute of Art, Ohio University. After my military service, I was down at Tulane University, where I then continued my teaching over there with that school. Then I went to Washington University in St. Louis, then into Kansas to teach at Bethany College there. From there, then I came here to New Jersey and worked with the Johnson Atelier Technical Institute of Sculpture, first as a teacher. Then they brought me up to the front as an assistant director to the academic program until they closed it up about 4 years ago. And then I've been on my own since. So, there you have it.
Does your daughter want to be an artist too?
What's that?
Does your daughter want to be an artist?
My daughter started off to be an artist. Then she got into music. She loves to sing. She has a very good voice. She is in a choir. She also performed her first time. She did an audition with the Princeton Festival, and she has performed with the La Boheme Princeton Festival as the children's chorus. She did very well, and she wants to do it again next year if they have something in that venue.
Bit by the bug.
What's that? She's been bit by the bug. Yes, exactly, exactly.
Is she the Annalise on these?
What's that?
Is she the Annalise on these pictures?
Yes, that is her painting. She had wanted it. She had actually not forced me, but simply, you know how little girls are, and they tie you, little things around your fingers and everything. And then she says, "I'd like to have that painting. Don't sell it." I thought, okay. So yes, she has a couple of pieces here that are hers. That I gave it to her as a gift.
So now you need to ask for permission to exhibit it.
Yes, again. Which she always gives, as long as it comes back. Yes.
All right, well, thank you so much for a very enlightening talk. We can continue the discussion down over the salami.
Thank you.
The applause was not for.
She had no idea. So, and Will was pretty pleased with herself. They got her there. But she was so nice to say. His cousin herself wrote.
But he wasn't as big as this one.
You want us with sunflowers?
I'm so delighted to be able to greet you this afternoon and for the GYURI Hollosy exhibition. Also because GYURI has a connection with me. That is my birthplace, hometown, and Cleveland. He spent a good number of years there after he arrived in the United States, and so we can be Clevelanders together. And I haven't been back. I've been back in Cleveland literally since 1945 when I went away to college. And now let me introduce Patricia Fazekas, the curator of the museum, who works endlessly in long hours. When I leave maybe at 7 o'clock, sometimes she's still here in getting these things up on the wall or taking things down and planning and so on. And we're so glad and proud to have her as the curator of the museum. Patricia.
Thank you so much, Professor Molnar. Welcome to you all this afternoon. As Professor mentioned, GYURI was raised in Cleveland, Ohio, But we like to think of him as a New Brunswick Hungarian community person. He's involved here with the activities of the Hungarian community. In 2006, there was a beautiful piece of his work installed at the corner of Somerset and Plum Street, a memorial of the 50th anniversary of the 1956 Hungarian Revolution. The resin piece of that we have in our museum collection. He has worked and lived all over the United States, from Kansas to New Orleans, and his commissioned works are scattered across the country, from Peoria, Arizona to Ohio to New Orleans to Boston. But we still like to think of him as a New Brunswick Hungarian community person. This wonderful exhibition really has given him the opportunity to show the 40 years of his work. And as we were sitting down yesterday at the conclusion of the day, surveying the completed exhibit, he looked around with a satisfied smile and said, "Yeah, I've done a lot of things here. I've done a lot of pieces." And indeed he has. The quantity of the works is surprising, but even more so, I would like to point to the quality of the works. The more that I talk to him about his work and about his work process, the more impressed I am about the thoughtfulness that goes into what he does. A lot of artists have told me they're inspired by nature or inspired by some element here or there, but his references go back as far as artists like Tiepolo, Van Eyck, and more recently the artists to whom he's related, the Hungarian artists like Csontváry and Hollosy. I really know of no better person to speak about this work than the artist himself. So I'm going to introduce him to you, GYURI Hollosy.
Thank you all for coming. On this particular exhibition, I'd like to open up a particular venue to all of you, and that is for you all to experience something about the work. I mean, a lot of times when you go to an exhibition, it's like, okay, you see it, but you can't touch it. You know, being a sculptor, I like to touch, and I like to, see what happens. But there's another experience in terms of what happens with some of these pieces, especially my more recent works. And so I'm going to kind of go over to this other room over there, if you all will sort of follow me, and I will show you some of those things as to what happens with these perpetual motion figurative pieces. Some of the pieces are marked with blue dots, and some of you may have wondered, what is this blue dot for? Because usually if you sell something, it's a red dot, but not sort of a blue dot. The blue dot really gives you the opportunity, the permission to be able to pick up the work and to move it in the described fashion that I will show you how to do this. Okay? So let's go to the other room. I'm going to try to get my baritone voice out here. These particular pieces here are perpetual motion, a series of perpetual motion, where what I'm really looking for is, there were sculptors back in the 60s that had sort of eliminated the concept of the base. I'm also looking in terms of these particular cases as to eliminate not only the base, but also the whole concept, what is up, what is up to the side, and give it that full motion of the figure in its dimensions. So, for instance, we have this one particular position. I then take it and I begin to move it. The whole dynamics of the figures begin to change within their concept. Again, defining a three-point system, I again move it. Other action begins to devise. So in this process, one sculpture may contain 10, 12, 14 different positions. I think the maximum I was able to acquire was 18. And I was really pushing it. So this is the experience that I'm opening up to all of you. The pieces that are marked with a blue dot, you may freely do so. There are some that are bronze, like that particular piece over there, that's bronze. I recommend that's pretty heavy. It's got some weight to it, so if you feel comfortable about moving it, go ahead. If not, these are resin bonded sawdust pieces. Very light, easy to move. Okay, enjoy.
Break your mind.
We know how you want it to be, but sometimes these things are bigger than you think. You want to go back to New Jersey, but sometimes New Jersey's not as big as you think. The city is like a garden, and it takes some time to sometimes these things are smaller than you think. What you see is the edge of the tide, and sometimes these things are deeper than you think. No one here is not on your side. You think you
You can't help it because she's right there.
When I go, we know how you want it to be, but sometimes these things are bigger than you think. And you want to go back to New Jersey, but sometimes New Jersey's not as big as you think. The city is like a garden, and if you give it time, it'll grow. The ocean's only 7 hours wide, so sometimes these things are smaller than you think, but all you see is the edge of the tide, and sometimes these things are deeper than you think. No one here is not